In the darkness of space, a capsule is stuck in low Earth orbit. No one knows how to get it back on Earth, and two astronauts are stuck in space on the International Space Station. This seems to be the drama of a new science fiction film by Hollywood, but indeed it's the plain truth. Welcome back on the SpaceInfo podcast. Here we talk about space and everything related to it. If you are passionate about space, astronomy, technology and everything about it, you can join all our social platforms at the SpaceInfo Club or our website at www.spaceinfo.club, where tons of content and a community of experts are there waiting for you. This is the SpaceInfo Club. Welcome back into a new episode of the SpaceInfo Club podcast. Today we talk about the Boeing Starliner. We are going to make a little recap and try to give you our view of the current situation with the capsule at the 18th of July 2024, still stuck on the International Space Station, with astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore stuck on the vehicle, and no one knows how and when they will come home. So, Boeing Starliner, is a new era in space exploration already ended? Well, actually, it never started, it seems, because from history we know that the Boeing Starliner is a class of partially reusable spacecraft which was designed to transport crew missions to the International Space Station and more generally for low Earth orbit missions. Indeed, the Boeing CST-100 Starliner, the initial name was Crew Space Transportation 100, and then named Starliner on the same line of Boeing commercial aerospace naming, let's say, policy, remembering about the 787 Dreamliner. Well, it's a class of partially reusable crew spacecraft which is developed mainly by Boeing with some subcontractors. The initial project came from a funding, 3 different rounds of funding to which also SpaceX participated, and everything started back in 2010 when NASA assigned different fundings to some private companies for the privatization of the commercial space in order to grant the access to private companies and in the optic of the transition of NASA itself from a developing to a regulatory entity. Indeed, the Boeing Starliner aimed to provide reliable and also cost-effective access to the International Space Station and more in general to low Earth orbit. The capsule has a diameter of 15 feet, which is more or less 4.5 meters, which is slightly larger than either the Apollo Command Module and also the SpaceX Crew Dragon, but is smaller than the Artemis Orion capsule. Actually, some people may confuse this capsule with the Orion one, but they have some different features. Also, the Starliner can hold a crew up to 7 people, but it can be reconfigured to hold up to 5 people with an additional cargo space for space. Actually, well, maybe you are wondering how it can be launched into space. Well, before talking about this, we'd like to talk about the development and design process. So, as I said, the development began in 2010, and the modular design with the capability to carry up to 7 astronauts was developed. Well, as you may know, it features a welderless structure for improved safety and also to reduce the production cost. These welderless structures was the first to give some problems in the production. Indeed, the heat shield is also welderless, but initially it was made up of 2 different parts which had to be welded together. The second prototype of the capsule already gave out some problems because the welding process was not so optimal, so some tolerances were not very low or low enough in order to grant the complete affordability, the complete reliability of the heat shield itself. So the entire production process had already to be reviewed completely, and now it features a welded heat shield. But which are the main key features of the spacecraft? Well, first of all, reliability. It is designed for up to 10 missions with minimal refurbishment, which means water, food, oxygen and propellant, just to make some easy name that everyone can think about. Another key feature is autonomous and manual control. Indeed, it can be controlled both autonomously and also manually by the crew. Well, keep in mind this feature because it will be very important in the final discussion when we talk about the current problem of the spacecraft now with Butch, Wilmore and Sunita Williams on board the International Space Station. Another key feature is safety. Indeed, it is equipped with an onboard system for the crew safety in case of an emergency during the launch. And this was one of the very first features that was tested. The spacecraft had to be developed. Well, the launch system indeed relies on existing rockets, existing vectors, and one of them it is compatible with 3 different, and in the future will be compatible with 4 different rockets. But now it was launched atop the Atlas V rocket, which is provided, as you may know, by United Launch Alliance. It is compatible also with different launch vehicles for additional flexibility, and also it launches from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. Now, the typical mission profile, as I said before, is to the International Space Station, more in general to low Earth orbit. Indeed, it focuses on existing mission profiles in order to adapt to the current commercial offer of the space market, which is still very contracted into around this particular orbit, which is around 400 kilometers from the surface of our planet. And this is the typical mission profile and also where the future private space station will be placed. Also, the Chinese Tiangong space station lays into an orbit very similar to the one of the International Space Station. It's slightly lower, but it is always a lower orbit. So for the typical mission profile of this capsule, this is what will happen. Well, also the duration of the typical mission will be around 200 days. Actually, the capsule will be qualified if everything goes as expected for up to 210 days in orbit. But we have seen that the current problems are already prevailing into this qualification target, and also the return on Earth is controlled through a controlled descent and landing on land using parachutes and airbag. This is quite different for what happens particularly for the American spacecraft. Indeed, you have to think about how the geography and the morphology of the territory of the country which develops a spacecraft actually really influences the development of the spacecraft itself. Think about the Soyuz spacecraft. Well, it was optimized and designed actually to land into the wild, hard territory of the old Russia. Indeed, this is the land is the widest territory, the widest environment they had at their disposal. So the Soyuz was designed exactly to land on that territory. On the other hand, the American spacecraft always were designed to land, apart from the space shuttle, to land into water, to splash down into the Pacific or the Atlantic Ocean, where it was easier to recover, easier to land because the impact was easier, was lighter. And now the design of this Starliner spacecraft actually, due to what we think is improved technology with parachute and also airbags, allows actually the spacecraft to land on a hard land, actually, where the recovery is easier. You don't have to deploy a fleet of vessels, helicopters and things like that. You still need helicopters and land vehicle, but probably it's easier, particularly if you have an improved guidance system where you can predict with a high enough precision where the spacecraft will land, actually. Also, now we should think about what I was mentioning before, and we talk about the test flights, where the first one was an uncrewed test flight with an orbital test launched in December 2019. Well, from the very beginning, the mission was nominal, everything was going as expected, but the capsule basically experienced some problems, which then after it landed, engineers at Boeing discovered that they were due to a software glitch, so the spacecraft could not establish a contact with the International Space Station, and after running on some orbits, it had to be forced to land back on Earth. Then people discovered that a problem with the software, a glitch with the mission elapsed timer, basically obliged the spacecraft to use too much propellant, and then it was forced to land back on Earth. And this was the very first test flight. After this one, 2019, a second one occurred. And also the problems were fixed, and Boeing demonstrated that they were capable on docking to the International Space Station. Also, the crew flight test planned to demonstrate the spacecraft's ability to safely transport astronauts. So, the certifying agency and also NASA and Boeing were confident now that people could be safely transported on board the Starliner, and therefore a crewed flight test, which should have been the third of the spacecraft, was cleared for takeoff. So, as I was saying, some challenges were encountered by the people at Boeing, and the first flight test encountered software issues, but safely returning on Earth the capsule. Well, extensive reviews and updates were made by engineers at Boeing, and to discover where the problem was with the software. And then, after it was fixed, a rigorous testing and validation was carried on by people and engineers at the company in order to improve the overall spacecraft. But you'll see that not any improvement was performed as people would expect. Indeed, why is this spacecraft so important? Maybe you are seeing that this project was born in 2010 and was given funding by NASA. The overall funding is something like between $3 and $4 billion only to Boeing to develop this kind of spacecraft. So after you see that some glitches, there's some problem, actually a lot of problems on different forefronts rise, why is Boeing still trying to develop and make this thing flying in space? Well, there are some very important features and the impact it can have on the future. Well, it will reduce the reliance on Russian Soyuz spacecraft for crew transport. Indeed, you are seeing that lately SpaceX is able to safely and nominally transport with some regularity American astronauts to the International Space Station. But also on this hand, America has to rely on a completely private company, which could be, if they want, almost completely independent from NASA and be 100% private, with basically no governmental control into it. So, and also having a monopoly by SpaceX into the US soil. Well, it won't be the greatest, let's say, the greatest scenario also for the USA, basically. So they want to have dominance on the overall space market, but also they want to have at least two companies in order to avoid the monopoly of SpaceX. So they want also to enhance the US capabilities in human space flight and also promoting commercial space industry and future space exploration missions. So as you may know, when giant and huge companies like Boeing are developing a project, a lot of different satellite companies, subcontractors, suppliers, material developers and things like that, a lot of agencies will benefit from this market because they together work to the development of this massive project, like in aviation, like in civil engineering. When projects this big are born, a lot of companies will benefit from those famous funding given by NASA to Boeing, which will redistribute the funding also to subcontractors and companies. What is the future expecting? Well, Boeing particularly is expecting from the Starliner spacecraft to perform regular missions to the ISS. We have seen that a single spacecraft will be able, is thought to be able to perform up to 10 different missions with some regularity and by very simple refueling and refurbishment, and then the capsule would be 100% reusable up to 10 missions. So the Boeing is planning to use two different spacecraft alternating the lift-offs of the spacecraft in order to perform basically one mission every 6 months to the International Space Station with a capsule. So also this gives the potential for other commercial missions in low Earth orbit, which will be not only to the International Space Station but also to the growing and other private companies which are willing to build their own space station. And also Boeing will contribute particularly with the know-how they are acquiring to NASA Artemis program and future lunar mission. Well, the Starliner is not yet certified to fly in low Earth orbit, so for sure it won't be certified to fly cislunar, translunar and deep space missions without modifications to the current design, but for sure the know-how people are acquiring now developing this massive project will for sure benefit the overall knowledge of the company and their capability to build further spacecraft. Well, this is amazing. The future is so bright for Boeing, but will this ever come true? Well, I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Well, Starliner is currently stuck on the International Space Station. They have a lot of problems. They experienced different problems also during the launch preparation. So I'm recalling you that this was the third flight test of the capsule, and the first one was not so good. The second one was said to be a success, but actually it only fixed the problems that they encountered in the previous one. The third one is a crewed space flight, and also it was to be launched on the 6th of May 2024, but it was delayed due to problems not really attributable to the spacecraft, probably attributable only to the launcher, so that's okay. But the problem is that the reschedule was for the 5th of July, for the 5th of June, and then rescheduled again. This time the problem was due to the spacecraft itself. Well, actually, at the first rescheduling in May 2024, engineers explored the spacecraft and also found out that a small leakage in the helium tanks was occurring. So almost by chance they discovered this leakage and this problem. They tried to fix it and found out other leakages and fixed them, and then they achieved for the spacecraft to be placed on top of a rocket, and after some rescheduling it was launched. Well, they experienced some problems, this is true, but then the spacecraft was launched in orbit. Well, they didn't finish here, because other problems occurred while approaching the International Space Station. And the two astronauts on board actually accomplished the docking with an automatic maneuver, but not everything was actually nominal, so some problems occurred. Now, the point is that while on board, the helium leakage in tanks were propagated. They had 28 helium tanks, and 5 of which experienced leakage. 4 of them were then repaired and were retained, let's say, safe to operate for overall propulsion system, is still not completely fixed. So now people on the ground at Boeing are trying to explore the whole scenarios, but the comeback of the 2 astronauts, so they cannot still come home because people are not so 100% confident that everything has been fixed. But the spacecraft initially was certified to stay in space for 30 days, then they said it was safe to stay for 45 days, and now they are still rescheduling the landing date because different problems are still occurring. Well, those problems are for the majority, let's say, of the overview, not really a political one, but a sort of how people are seeing, how companies are seeing into the overall space environment. Well, SpaceX could launch, as they had demonstrated in the past to be able to, another Crew Dragon in order to rescue the 2 astronauts and make the Boeing Starliner safely land uncrewed on Earth, and then happen what could happen, but no people are on board, so they're all safe and can safely land on another spacecraft, which will be the Crew Dragon. Well, Boeing cannot cannot sustain this humiliation they see like this, because another private companies which got basically half of the fund that they got from NASA, developed in less time with less problem, is already 100% operative and is nominally executing a space mission to the International Space Station, while they cannot accept to be rescued by this company and be humiliated publicly basically. So they are trying their best in order to solve the problem with the Starliner and in order to use that very spacecraft to land the two astronauts, Williams and Wilmore, back on Earth. Another possibility would be using the Soyuz spacecraft. This would be costly also under the economical point of view, but not only, also under the political point of view, so probably this would be worse than the SpaceX option. So this today is the scenario. I don't know how it will evolve in the future. I hope that people will get back safely on Earth, and also Boeing will find out how they can fix their problem and also improve their design. Hope the Starliner will live and still fly in the future. For now, it's everything. That's all, folks. Thanks for watching. See you in the next episode.